Hello, and welcome to our summer program for All Souls, Regathering Souls on Pilgrimage. I'm Patrick Egan, a parishioner at All Souls. I'm also an administrator at Clapham School and an adjunct professor of New Testament at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School. This video is to introduce you to the content and structure for our summer series. As a church community, we will walk together through the book of Philippians. And in today's video, I'll give you a brief overview of some key ideas from the book of Philippians, as well as introduce you to our summer program. So, regathering souls on pilgrimage. Let's dive in. So the goal here is for us to journey together. And how does that happen? That happens by us intentionally seeking opportunities to study scripture together, to pray together, and to meet with one another together in venues that are appropriate for us to maintain healthy standards of social distancing. But the idea is, as Illinois opens up, as we have more opportunity to meet together, to make that happen in some kind of structured way that gives us the opportunity to use this summer well. The journey will be a journey through the book of Philippians. So I wanted to initiate a few ideas here that would help us to picture what this journey will look like. I have here a picture of the Via Egnatia. This is a Roman road that went from Rome eastward through Greece, pointing towards Asia Minor. It was an avenue of tremendous trade and exchange, and Philippi was strategically located on that route. And Philippi itself became a place people would journey to because of its prominence as a port of trade, as a cultural center. And so this Via Egnatia pictures for us in many respects what it means to journey together. We will discover in the book of Philippians that Paul was imprisoned, and that because of that, Philippi became a church that was in transition, largely because Paul, being the founder of that church, the Philippian church needed to respond to that situation, a crisis of their own existence, their founder in prison. What would happen next? The Philippian church, the church at Philippi, was also a church that had a certain amount of debate and dissension within it. And Paul's letter, we'll see, is directed towards finding unity in the gospel, despite the fact that there were cultural differences and theological differences. So let's look at some background things related to the church at Philippi. You can see Philippi is located in what would be called modern-day Macedonia. It was Macedonia then as well. It's named after Philip, the father of Alexander the Great. And yet it was a Greek-speaking place. It would have been really thought of as part of Greater Greece at this point. And then, of course, Greece, Asia Minor, Jerusalem, Egypt are all under Roman authority during the time of the New Testament. Paul was imprisoned at Rome. Because he was a Roman citizen, his imprisonment wouldn't have been the worst possible imprisonment. There was a certain amount of freedom he had. The meals he had would have been substantially better than somebody who wasn't a Roman citizen. And yet there were limitations. There were chains. There was the experience of having a lot of freedom of movement to take the gospel to different locations that was now hindered and limited. So in Paul's own experience, he had this crisis of being imprisoned. In the letter, he is directing Timothy to go to Philippi and admonishing the Philippians to accept Timothy, who will be taking over leadership there. In some ways, the letter to the Philippians is an introductory letter, a letter of recommendation for Timothy to assume leadership at this church in transition. There were debates among the Philippians regarding the issue of circumcision, and circumcision being one of several different issues, demarcating a divide between the Gentile and Judean faith. So what were the practices that were in inheritance from that Old Testament faith, whether it be circumcision, food laws, associating with people inside or outside of that Judean faith? And so circumcision becomes that central feature that demarcates where one is in terms of thinking of Christianity as emanating from that Old Testament faith. Should people become Jewish first and then Christian? Or is there freedom? And a lot of these debates were resolved at the Jerusalem Council, and yet there would remain in all of these city churches debates among those who were still inclined towards that more traditional approach to religiosity in terms of circumcision, food laws, holidays, and all of that, and those who were able to live in the liberality of a more Gentile-oriented understanding of the gospel. And so that debate was going on in the Philippian church. Paul, as he's addressing the church at Philippi, recognizes that Philippi and that Philippian church is a valuable church. It was a church that was a blessing to others, whether it was the famine in Jerusalem or the persecutions in Jerusalem. Philippi, from its accumulated wealth as a major trade center, was able to sponsor the church at Jerusalem, to send gift packages there. And they would do likewise for other churches, whether it be at Ephesus or Corinth. And so it was a place of value, of blessing to others, and it was a fruitful church. It was a church where they believed the gospel, they were living out the gospel, despite the fact that there were debates and dissension within the church. And it's that idea, the value, the blessing, the fruitfulness of that church that Paul is going to lean into to help them find a way forward in unity together through the gospel. Well, that hopefully gives us an introduction to the book of Philippians. Let me tell you a little bit more about the process this summer. We will be devoting 8 weeks to reading through the book of Philippians carefully, closely, reading it together, asking questions of it, of a practical nature. It will be oriented towards more inductive study. So it's not like you need to have specialized knowledge in order to really engage with the book. Some of the resources we'll provide you with are daily readings. Mary Baker will be updating the website regularly, even daily, with the Liturgy with Us app. And you can click through that to find what the daily readings are, to incorporate that into your daily devotions and prayers. There will be live meetings, and we will post the scheduled dates for that. We're looking at Tuesdays at 6:30 to meet together. Some of those meetings will be in person, where we can meet on the lawn out in front of church. Some of those meetings will be Zoom meetings, so that you can stay at home if you are concerned about social distancing and maintaining healthy distancing standards, we will offer both of those venues so that you can find a meeting forum that works for you. You might not be able to make all of the meetings, maybe one or two throughout the 8-week series, and that's fine. You can participate at whatever level of engagement you want to. There will be discussion and prayer at these meetings. We'll go through some of the questions, we'll talk about insights gained through our readings, and then we'll pray together. As always, you can go to the All Souls website to keep up to date on the series, to find out more information about directions we're heading, so that we can all journey together in this process of pilgrimage as a church. So let's look to our first reading during the first week. We will read together Philippians 1 through 14. That's our goal for that first meeting. So here are some questions for you to consider as you read through this first section of Philippians. You will see the word thanksgiving or thankful or thankfulness show up several times in this opening section. And so here's a great question for you to consider. What is the basis of Paul's thankfulness? Why is he thankful? Which leads very quickly into the second question, knowing that he is a person suffering due to injustice. He is suffering imprisonment because he dared to preach the gospel. And we need to ask this question, how do we reconcile the injustice of his sufferings and his thankfulness? They would seem on the surface to be two very different ideas, not very compatible. And yet Paul seems to think that they actually go together quite well. And so we can do some work to think through how do we reconcile those things. And then more practically, what is there that we can be thankful for now? In the midst of our current trials in the year 2020, we know of the sufferings of the different events during this time. There's been injustice that has been part of this as well. How can we be thankful? How can gratitude be part of our mode of existence in this time frame? That's really it for now. I look forward to meeting with people, and we will send out our dates for the next meeting. We'll send out videos for each reading that will introduce you to the next section and initiate questions. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.